Welcome to Keeping It Green, a podcast for ornamental plant professionals and enthusiasts, with hosts Margaret Pickoff and Tim Abbey.
So hello and welcome to the Keeping It Green podcast, a podcast from Penn State Extension for ornamental plant professionals and enthusiasts. I'm one of your hosts, Margaret Pickoff, and I'm a horticulture educator with Penn State Extension. And on each episode, I'll be joined by one of my colleagues on the green industry team as a co-host. So on today's episode, my co-host is Tim Abbey. Hi, Tim.
Hey, Margaret, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm managing to keep warm on this chilly day.
I know it's only middle November. I'm already done with the fall and winter. I'm not a cold weather fan.
You know, it's been so mild in Philly. And so I kind of got used to these mild, sunny fall days. And then it seemed like a switch went off and now it's winter.
It was quite the drastic change down here in the Southeast. I don't know if it was for the rest of the state, but yeah, we were a week, two ago, 70s, felt like, spring or whatever. And now it's, 40.
Yeah. It's a pretty drastic shift. And those poor plants out there. Well, anyways, we'll have to get used to it as it's only going to get colder and darker. Yes. But luckily, we have a great guest on the show today. So we would like to welcome on Jim MacKenzie from Octoraro Native Plant Nursery based in Kirkwood, Pennsylvania. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Hi, Margaret. Hi, Tim. Nice to see you both.
Hey, Jim, good to see you again.
So I know, Jim, that you and Tim have worked together for a little while, but I would love to hear more about Octoraro and the nursery itself, and also what your role at the nursery is currently.
Sure. And first off, I'll just say that unlike the two of you, we're very much cold weather fans here. This is our time of year. We're all right. We love the cool, and it also signifies the end of our fall shipping season. So we're actually getting a little excited about the possibility of some cooler weather. But so Octoraro, I am a co-owner, I would say the operational management side of it, but my partner, Mark Gutshaw, actually founded it back in 1990. We're going to be going into our 33rd year. And so I joined him 2.5 years after he started the nursery. And so we've got over 3 decades, which is kind of cool, but also sort of a little scary for myself that we've been doing it this long. It seems like yesterday sometimes, and other times it feels like the whole 32 years. But we've been very, very fortunate, extremely fortunate. We started off originally as Octoraro Wetland Nurseries, and our focus then was, as you might imagine, it was a lot on the early environmental end of things, was wetland mitigation projects. So a lot of the plants that we grew were actually herbaceous wetland mitigation plants. We were about 80% herbaceous and about 20% woody trees and shrubs. And a lot of the market at that time was driven by regulatory requirements and needs, and contractors or even the state, PennDOT, whatever, building and developing in wetlands and having wetland impacts, they'd have to mitigate that. So they'd have to create additional wetlands. And then that's where we would come in and provide the plant material for those wetland creation projects. And that was what drove us for a long time. Probably the first decade or so was much more along that mix. And then in 1991, Maryland passed the Maryland Reforestation Act, and there suddenly became a lot of demand for woody plants. And so over the next decade or so, we were transitioning, if you will, to more of an equal product. I would say going up to more like a 50-50 mix. We were still doing herbaceous and woodies. And by the time we hit the early 2000s, a lot had changed in the marketplace, how the government viewed wetlands. And the wetland mitigation side of things had gone down considerably, and demand for the herbaceous had gone down considerably for us and what we did at the wholesale level. And so we made a decision in the early 2000s to just switch completely to trees and shrubs. And that's where we are now today. And that is still what drives our market. I mean, we still occasionally miss the herbaceous market, but there's a lot of other players out there that we refer to. And so we pretty much stick with the trees and the shrubs. That's a little brief history of our 3 decades.
With your background, and I don't think these two topics kind of separate from each other, but did you get into this field more because of a horticultural interest, or more of like the ecological like ecology reason?
Yeah, actually, probably the latter. My degree in 1986, dating myself nicely, is from Penn State in landscape architecture and land planning and things like that. So yes, I had my 2 years of woody plant ID at Penn State, but horticulture wasn't the driver for me when I was in landscape architecture. The stewardship, the ecological components of that profession were always where sort of my interest lied. And then when Mark and his wife Kelly started their own firm, and then he saw the opportunity to spin a nursery off of this, when he saw the demand rising for this type of material, that's when they contacted me and said, hey, why don't you think about getting together on this? So yeah, I love what we do, and I love the fact that we're growing plants, but it was more, and still continues for me to be more, about the environment and the ecological aspects of what we do.
Are most of your clients geared up to doing the ecological restoration, or do you also have people just who are like native plant geeks and have found you as a good supplier, and they come back to you for plants?
It's primarily, when people ask, I say we're primarily an environmental restoration type niche part of the native plant, as opposed to the retail. That said, the retail segment, and when I say retail, I'll define that a little bit more, has grown significantly. So, we are still the primary source for those restoration type projects, whether that's ag conservation programs or green infrastructure and bioswales and reforestation. A lot of it's driven from our sales is water quality related issues. The riparian buffers of the last 15, 20 years focus on trees, on streams. We've definitely taken advantage of that market, and it's done very well for us, and we're appreciative of those partnerships. But yeah, I mean, if you think about it, the native plant movement, 30 years or 20 years in the making and stuff, I think it's a culmination of all those factors of longevity, garden writers writing about the benefits of it. You've got the Doug Tallamy books out there, the pollinators, the national, the federal, the state, all entities of government focusing now on the benefits and what native plants bring to the environment. And now it's down to the, much more strongly down to the individual landowners. And I think COVID, if anything, helped, light that market even further. So I think it's a culmination of just decades of people and awareness and getting that word out there. And now you've got, so much specialization within the native plant market too. I mean, there's people that are just growing certain species, and that's like their entire business plan. Or there's e-commerce. People can go online and order native plants online from any number of hosts of place. So it's very, very much diversified, as has our individual customer base. I mean, we sell to a lot of landscape contractors that work in this industry, but at least half of our business is through nonprofits, and they're not doing it because it's regulatorily driven. They want water quality in their watersheds and their communities, and they're doing it because they think it's the right thing to do. So that's a big difference. And when we started 30 years ago, that was maybe 20% of the people, because there wasn't funding mechanisms. It was hard to come by money for these types of things. And that's all very much changed. So I would say we still have a regulatory component for sure, but a lot of our sales are driven by people out there doing really good work in their communities.
That's really great to hear, because as someone who's kind of new to the field, relatively, I think I sort of entered the horticulture world when native plants, were already pretty popular, and they're just getting more popular with both the consumer side of things and the industry side and the municipal side. So it's nice to hear that confirmed, because that's certainly what it looks like from our vantage point as well. And so I was kind of wondering, as someone who was sort of inspired by the ecological aspects of this to enter into this field, how that sort of translates into your business practices. Like if you have certain guiding principles, and if your growing practices sort of are reflected in that sort of initial interest in ecology and the environment.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and actually, we promote that up on our website under our business practices. We talk about the things that we do. I mean, we don't want to just sell these plants, which obviously that's our mission, is to put out good plants out there and let them do their work. As we say in our place, they have to work for their dinner out there. They're up against a lot of adversity, but yeah, with our own business practices, it hits on a number of different things. We, starting with water conservation, some of it's by necessity based on the wells that we have in our one facility out here. The groundwater is not that strong, but we only use drip irrigation technology. And so, compared to traditional overhead, we're saving 70 to 80% of the water that another nursery might if they're trying to water their plants from overhead. So we use spray stakes and drip emitters for most of our crop. Now there's our smallest container seedlings. That's not practical. We do use overhead for that, but even down to our emitters in the spray areas where they put out their arc of irrigation mist, if there's any sort of overflow into the aisles, we'll put during the growing season, we put product out there so that we're capturing that water. So water conservation is a very big part of our philosophy. We're neonic free. And that's, generally we never really used a lot of neonics to begin with. There were a couple of problem plants, systemic borers and things like that we had to previously, but we've gotten away from them altogether. We will repurpose and reuse our containers. We'll take them back from our customers whenever possible, try to use them to the extent that we can for their lifespan. And then when we're done with them, we do have the opportunity. We're fortunate that we have a place that has an incinerator nearby. And so they'll take that plastic and pulverize it and burn it for energy generation, which, granted, it's not the cleanest of energy that we'd all like at some point, but it is still a final end use for a product. Our poly covering in our greenhouses goes down to North Carolina to support the plastic lumber trade. We have electric vehicles. We have reduced our peat, and actually, especially with the crisis last year, we didn't have any peat in our mix, but we were down to just like 5%. And ultimately, I think I think after this year, without it being available, we discovered that we can probably get rid of it altogether from our mix and still be fine. With growing a lot of wetland plants, it was important to have that peat component, but we're finding that we can grow our product without it. So, those are just a couple of the things, but yeah, we try to walk the walk and talk the talk.
That's definitely more than a couple. That's really trying to come at it multifaceted, that, you're trying to promote that outside of your business, but also within the business. My next question is completely off the topic that we've been on. Where Kirkwood is, to me, is a very rural location compared to some of the other parts of Lancaster County. How do you attract and keep employees down in that area?
Yeah, we are. We're basically as rural as you can get. We're in the heart of Amish country, southern Lancaster County. There's a lot of ag preservation down here, agricultural overlays to keep this area agricultural oriented, and that benefits us. So it's a beautiful part of the world. But to your question of labor, we have an all Amish women labor force down here. I'll be honest. I tell people this. I'm not sure we'd be in business if we didn't. They are a fantastic culture to work with. And my family's originally from Lancaster, so I grew up, loving the horse and buggies when we'd come down to visit family from up in Warren, where I'm originally from, the Northwest. And so to be having relationships with this community is it's delightful, quite honestly. It makes it easy to come to work for. You might be having a bad day and they're out there potting away and they break into song, and all of a sudden you realize, hey, this is not such a bad day. And so, we've been blessed. We really have. I've been to Amish weddings. I've been to Amish funerals. We are very connected to our people. They love working for us. And so we're lucky. That said, we are challenged to continue to find the number of people that we need, Amish, and I'll address non-Amish later, as we refer to ourselves, the English down here. Mm-hmm. But the Amish, in the last 30 years, the Amish economy has diversified so greatly. It's just unbelievable. And if you're familiar with this area, you can see it. Almost every Amish farm has some other sort of enterprise on it, whether that's, like the dairy farmers now have cheese processing, or they've got butchers, or or they're fabricators. It used to be, it was largely the young Amish men that were in demand. Contractors would drive in, pick them up, and go do projects, and they do construction and things like that. But you've got Amish home builders. Produce is what's driving the big demand for our girls down here. We are the second largest state of organic produce in the nation outside of California, and a lot of that's coming from this area. So there's more and more produce being produced down here, and that's all, of course, the same season as we are trying to produce. So we pay exceedingly well. We have incentives for people to work more hours, and our crew is top notch. It's just there's not enough people. And it's even within their own organizations, the Amish are having a hard time finding enough of their own people. They're in healthcare. Our girls have and yes, and they refer to themselves as girls, so I do too. But these are young women that they may be in healthcare. They work with special needs kids. They work at an equestrian centers. I had several of our girls that accompanied a child that had heart surgery up in Boston, and they took the train up there with them and were right there with them. So we love to see what they do, but it does impact our business, not to the extent that we're panicked, but certainly we're keeping a close eye on things.
Yeah, that is the labor situation kind of across the board seems to be pretty challenging these days. And I know in this particular industry, I had a question about, well, I have a lot of questions for you about production. But before we get to that, to kind of go off of that, the part of the state that you're in, I sort of associate with a lot of nursery production. And I'm always curious about the sort of network of nursery owners and nursery workers and how they sort of support one another. I feel like we see this in the small organic farming world where,
sure,
smaller producers or people using ecological methods of production particularly tend to know each other and to help each other and teach each other. And I kind of wonder, is there a similar structure there with both native nurseries, of which there seem to be a good number in this area, but also just like nursery production in general? Do you find that you're mentoring younger business owners and you're sort of getting ideas from one another? And is there that sort of network of support that I sort of perceive, or maybe it's wishful thinking that everyone's talking to each other and loves each other, but
they're all cutthroat businessmen who don't share any trade secrets.
Yeah,
right.
The answer to your question is both within the native plant nursery growers production, but also the larger industry. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that attracted me to this nursery early on. I was mentioning before we got started here with Sandy that we've been long engaged with the Pennsylvania Landscape and Nursery Association. I was recruited to that, got on the government relations committee probably 28 years ago. Was on the board, still am on the government relations committee. And that's the neat thing about this industry is there's competition, obviously, but the cutthroatness and things like that you might see in other industries is generally speaking not present. Little outliers here or there, but in this part of the world, you're right. I mean, the Southeast Pennsylvania it's a hotbed of horticulture, and you can take that all the way up to the public gardens as well. But within the growers community, we've got within a 20-minute drive here, we've got North Creek. I've known Steve Castorani, the owner of that, for 25 years, and his former partner, Dale Hendricks, who goes Greenlight Plants, doing really cool native understory, right on his own property, is in that same area. You've got Watercrest Farms, you've got Harmony Hill, you've got native natural landscapes nursery, you've got some perennial growers. I mean, and formerly, Conard Pyle, and it's still, and I fail to know who these guys are now. They're still a massive operation right off Route 1 and 896. So we do know a lot of those folks, and we stay in touch with them. Since COVID, some of that social contact, like everybody else, has gone by the wayside. I think we're all probably looking forward to being able to get down to Baltimore at Mance and see each other in the, face to face, in the first time in a long time. Our industry does like to get together. Sometimes with adult beverages helps brings us together. Won't deny that. But yeah, it's a pretty good group, and that's both all the way up to senior level ownership, but then down to the second part of your question, mentorship. Yeah, that's a big deal for me, because when I first got in, and it's funny, I'm sitting here talking about this 30 years ago. If you'd have asked me if I'd still be doing this 30 years ago, I said, no way. I don't know. I've just always been somebody that needed new experiences. But, when you own your own business, you get that every single day. And so we are fortunate to just hired two relatively young people, one in the early 30s, one in their mid 20s, and they're phenomenal, and so much needed. I'm sitting here thinking to myself, why didn't we try to do this, a decade ago? Because they're just bringing so much life force to our industry. And yeah, I'm absolutely trying to mentor them and anybody else that, has interest in this, because this industry is, in my opinion, I'm very much an optimist on many things, but we're in a state of decline. And we touched on one of the subjects, and that's labor. I've watched so many growers just close up their shops, and they're not being replaced. It started with the 2008 and the housing collapse. That was a huge thing going on simultaneously with generational shifts in the industry. A lot of growers that were in their late 60s, early 70s said, this is my exit strategy, I'm out of here. But it's continued since then. When you see places like Lawyer Nursery out in the Pacific Northwest that grew, millions and millions of seedlings every year, they're gone. Their production was never replaced. No buyers, no competitors, friendly competitors. Nobody bought them out. That production is gone. And I think it was maybe Chris Hewlin at Harmony Hill told me recently in a survey that he'd heard was that just Southeast Pennsylvania alone lost 2,000 acres of production horticulture in the last census, in the last 10 years since that was measured. That's significant. People are having a hard time finding, field grown trees, and just in general, massive number of people that have left this industry and have not been replaced. Of the 12 growers that I was first involved with in PLNA, 11 of them are gone. Their businesses are gone. There's only one that had a generational plan in place that still is in business. So it's an issue. It's going to be a problem. I don't think we've bottomed out yet, to be honest. And labor is a key to that.
How do you think we get, at the younger generation, kids who are middle school, high school, even before they reach college, interested in horticulture specifically for this podcast, but I guess the biological sciences in general? I know all of us, on the podcast today, in our little way, we try to do that. I get asked to come in occasionally to career days and try to promote it. Yeah. Do you have any ideas, I guess, on how we raise awareness? And you can have a rewarding career related to plant material, and make a living off of it. It's not like you're just going out and mowing grass.
Yeah. Well, I think the greater minds in the industry have started that with programs like Seed Your Future, and we support a group like that. And they've got a relatively new executive director there, and from what I can see and what they're putting out there, they've got this whole career day Seed Your Future thing going on, and we participated in that year one. And essentially, that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to get out there in the early programming for the schools and the educational curriculums and place like that. And some of the state organizations are parts of that, or they're doing it on their own. I think we can all try to do that what we can locally in our own areas or regionally. We might be talking to the FFA folks and stuff like that to say, hey, there's other parts of agriculture that include us. We are part of the ag community. It doesn't have to be just food and fodder. So I think there's a number of programs that have been started, and they were started a lot by the Longwoods and the folks like that recognize that, hey, we're just not seeing any. I mean, you're seeing horticultural programs across the state, across the nation being closed from an educational standpoint, trying to get them within the educational departments to get this industry as a high valued, I can't remember the word I'm looking for, but a high educational career program, so that they have to then have opportunity for state recognition and curriculum and things like that. It was on a decline, and I'm hoping that is starting to turn around. So I think it's a combination of factors, but I'm hoping that also, even when you talked earlier about past and organic farming, some of those people spill out into us. I think, we have to have presence in the affiliated and partner industries in case we can grab those folks. I mean, you tie this back to labor. There's a lot of programs out there that are, targeting low at-risk offenders, getting them back into the workforce. And I'm familiar with several programs, not only in Pennsylvania, but Delaware, that, just getting those people out, getting them trained. And in some case, getting them trained in our industry is the easy part. You've got other life issues and life skills issues that have to be resolved with that. But, I think that's another potential avenue, because let's say you only have 3 or 10 of success through programs like that. It's 3 or 10 that we didn't have. That's 30% of people that we didn't have previously that now have found a career path, and one that's sustainable. So, it's multifaceted, but I don't see a quick fix. STEM and all those other things, just focus on all of the STEM stuff. Fine for those people that want it, but I think there's a whole host of people that maybe don't want STEM, and we could be a viable option to them.
I want to shift gears a little bit and make sure that we ask you a couple of production questions. And I have too many to fit in this podcast probably, but 2 things I'm curious about, one of which you touched on briefly before about not using neonicotinoid pesticides, and another something that I'm interested in is the seed collection process. And so I guess to start with the pest management, I feel like there is probably, because native plants sort of have that ecological underpinning, people might assume that native plant nurseries are completely organic and, only use OMRI certified products or organic management. And obviously, for the purposes of creating an ecological landscape, there are certain pesticides that you don't want to incorporate into production, which could harm pollinators or whatever's feeding on those plants later. But how do you sort of balance the ecological hopes and expectations of these plants later on with making sure that you're keeping your pest management in mind and everything sort of under control, so that these plants are viable and that you can sell them?
Yeah. I'm hearing 2 questions in there. We'll break that out. The one was about seed, and that's a whole topic on itself, seed collection, processing, all that stuff. And the other is sort of the IPM type of thing. Just to the IPM process, I mean, that's particularly Kevin and Rihanna's, our new employees. I pretty much just turn that over to them, and they'd be happy to have a conversation. But I think it's definitely, you need to come out for a tour sometime. But, give you an example. Rihanna did a great post on Insta sometime this summer where we had a little infestation of some aphids that were chewing on our button bush and things like that, and in the greenhouse. And she grabbed a couple of the praying mantises and just stuck them in there, and problem resolved. And she's got this great Insta video of the praying mantis just like chowing on all the aphids in there. So our sort of philosophy is, if it's not killing it, it's probably nothing that needs to be treated. I mean, we don't treat for Japanese beetles. We don't spray, we don't trap, we don't do anything. They come in, they feed for a couple of weeks on about 6 of their primary species, and then they're gone. And what I do think becomes a little bit of I don't know how to say. So from a retail standpoint, that can pose a challenge come fall, because now you've got this skeletalized leaves on these plants that are perfectly fine plants, but you've still got to sell them to the general public. So this becomes an educational thing at the retail level, at the consumer level, that I don't think has fully been addressed yet. And especially in the fall, because by the fall when we're shipping, those same species have probably already pushed out some new growth. So you've got these nice green leaves, and then you got the skeletalized leaves beneath them that the Japanese beetles fed on. From our standpoint, it doesn't matter. The plants are healthy. It's all about the roots. We don't care what the leaves look so much like at that point, but we have to maybe hold some people's hand to say, hey, or I'll put it out there in advance, say, if you got any concerns about being able to sell to our retailers, these 6 species have been fed on by Jap beetles. If you don't want them, fine, we'll keep them. We'll sell them to somebody else. But just trying to give them a heads up. But I think on the other end of it, the retail, they've especially in the fall, because let's face it, you get dogwoods and maples, and they've got leaf spots, and that's what they have. We're not going to sit there and aggressively spray fungicides forever on things when that's just what the leaves look like in the fall. So I think there's some consumer education on the retail end of it that needs to occur about the expectations. Those leaves are going to be gone within a matter of 2 months, and back in the spring they'll come out looking nice and green and healthy. So there's a little of that component to it, but yeah, I mean, if it's not something that's going to kill our crop, which is very little, I mean, we don't really run into that a whole lot, to be completely honest. So we're fortunate that way. If that answers that part of the question, I could go on to seed stuff, but
yeah, absolutely. And I think that is something that we sort of run into as educators, is especially with talking about native plants, is like, if you want the benefits of these plants are great for insects, lots of things feed on them, you're contributing to the food web, then sometimes you're going to have some feeding damage on these plants. And
cosmetic damage in the fall. Absolutely.
Right. The consumer education side of things seems really important in horticulture, in sales in general, but maybe particularly for this portion of horticulture. Yeah. So I did want to ask you about seed collection. And so, yeah, how does that work for your business? And are there, I think that the theory that is, probably scientifically based is, if you collect seeds in a particular geographic area, then the plants grown from those seeds will be adapted to that sort of specific zone and will do better in their lifetime. Is that kind of the strategy that you guys have been using, and have you found that is true?
So a couple of thoughts on that. So basically you're talking about provenance and where's your seed source coming from. And within our segment of the industry, that has greater importance than, I'll just say the rest of the I don't want to, that the traditional commercial residential industry that is not specifically geared towards native or specifically geared towards the environmental restoration aspect things or the pollinator focus and things like that. I mean, on the one hand, you have to recognize that the rest of this industry is vast, and it spans California to Texas to Florida to Tennessee to New England and everything in between. Plants cross this country in tractor trailers in massive quantities, and plants from the South come way up north and vice versa and things like that. So I think for our community, sometimes I don't think it's actually talked much about it when we have these conversations about native plants and things like that. But that is the reality. I mean, probably 80% of the industry and the people that buy plants, whether that's retail or wholesale, they don't care about provenance. But for us, it matters. And so the goal is to try to collect and use, I like to refer regional. I'm not a big fan of the term local, I'll be honest. Local to me is like, okay, if you want local provenance, that might be for a very specialized habitat, rare and endangered or something like that. But I'm also not going to be convinced that, the pin oak of the acorn that was collected up in Clarion County is going to be that much different than the one down here in Chester County. And I don't think you're going to see serious ecological problems with that. So yeah, the goal is we are a mid-Atlantic company. So we sell in the mid-Atlantic regions. We go maybe as far as New England, rarely, but New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania. That's our primary market. So yeah, that's where we're trying to collect from and get our seed source. But in some cases, it's not possible. So on a couple of species, we may have to go to the Eastern Great Lakes to get some seed source. And we will do that if it means not having a crop. But the nice thing is we can track all that information. So if somebody needs to know that, we've got a much better system than we used to have that. And it can change every year. Like that's another philosophy. One is try to get as much as we can within this region from, say, the Delaware to the Susquehanna, from Delaware up to the northern tier of Pennsylvania, something in that just geographic region. Yeah, and I had a thought going with that, and I think I've just lost my train. Imagine that. But that's the one thing. And then we can't collect it all either. We have to deal with other collectors, and that is broadly that's another concern that we have, and it's also a national and a state level. I mean, there's the seed collectors of this country are also aging out. And there's not a whole lot of seed collectors coming up behind them. So we've aggressively expanded our seed collection program of propagation because out of necessity, because I've seen advertisements for some growers out in places like the Pacific Northwest that they're looking for East Coast seed because a lot of their sources have dried out, or they can't find it, or they don't have their own and stuff like that. So the seed issue across the state to me is as equal a concern for the native plants, for the ecological aspects. And there's aggressive programs from the feds and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the Park Service and everybody to try to rectify those. There's some progress in this area, but I mean, somebody wanted to go into start a startup business, go out and start your own native seed collection business because there's a massive demand for it. So that's what we try to do. We collect, we try to collect and do our whole environmental thing there too. We won't collect, like if we go on site, we'll collect maybe 50% of what we see and leave 50% on the ground for everybody else to participate in. So I think it's something where we have agreements with some of the public gardens around here, or individual landowners, or academic institutions where, we have the agreement with them in advance to say, hey, we'd love to come on your property and collect some seed that we see there, and we'll do something for you in return. And it seems to work out pretty well.
Do you strictly propagate off of seed, or do you also take cuttings from plants?
Primarily seed. Seed, like a lot. Yeah, like 90 to 95% is seed. Wow. We will do willows a lot from cuttings. And of course, you can do a lot of the shrub, the wetland shrub species, dogwoods and nine bark, and some of the other species are elderberry. They can be also done by cutting, but we'll do them first from seed. And then if for some reason we run out, we'll replicate and do some with cutting stock. But I think I just remembered what my other thing that I was going to say earlier is try not to collect from the same location is equally important. You need a diversified seed base. You don't want to keep going to the same seed bank all the same time. Just like, that's where you get into the cultivars and stuff like that is, it's all from one parent stock. So you want to try to keep that diversity ecologically from a seed standpoint. So it's pretty cool. Kevin and Rihanna have done a great job. They've got this all on GPS. They can, drill into a certain tree and say, hey, we had a robust year this year, but the next year it was nothing. And so we're getting a pretty decent database of our region, and still continue to look for partners that we can either go to their places and collect, or we might have some folks that will collect for us in return. And then we'll just, reimburse them for their time and efforts.
Wow. I find the seed collection part of this fascinating. I feel like I think we should have you back on for a whole episode just focused on that, because I have a lot more to ask about that process. And as you said,
I'll put Kevin or Rihanna on for that conversation.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
They'll be able to fill you in far more than I love watching them do it. And it's really, the coolers are filling up right now with all of our seed. Wow. We're getting them all cold stratified and all that stuff.
And as you said, it's something that really sets the native nursery trade apart and the production apart from the vast, network of other horticultural production that relies mostly on cuttings and taking genetic material from the same exact plant and replicating it. And there's a lot of cool stuff in there. So we would love to have them on the show. If you could pass along our contact
I'm sure they'd be happy to
information.
be on the show.
Great. So I think we're about ready to wrap up here. Jim, it's been wonderful to have you on, and thanks for sharing a bit about the nursery and about the work that you do. We usually like to end the podcast episode asking a slightly more personal question of our guests. So we are wondering what you like to do when you're not at work.
That could be a dangerous question.
Remember, we're being recorded right now. So.
Yes. Thank you for that gentle reminder. I do obviously like much of our industry, and I don't get enough of it because I'm in front of my computer a lot. I do like being outdoors a lot. I love to ski and, walk, hike, kayak. Golf is getting less and less frequent because I don't like to golf in the summer, and it's the only time that it seems to be available. Spring and fall are too busy. But yeah, I do enjoy being outside, and that's where I'd like to spend a lot of my time when I can. So it's not necessarily what I do outside of work, but I also do have another profession. I'm a mental health nurse as well. I've been out of the profession for a little while now for a couple of reasons, but it's a unique other part of my career path that I enjoy a lot as well. And I have to make a decision here pretty soon if I'm going to dive back into it or not, because you can't be out of that profession for very long before you lose your edge. So, but yeah, so that's something else. And yeah, I'm very fortunate. My wife and I are very compatible. We go home, go on walks, and just talk about our days, and that's good. We don't have to. We have a pretty simple life, and we enjoy the simple life.
Oh, that's wonderful. That sounds great. Yeah, well, we've really enjoyed talking with you. Looking
Likewise.
forward to meeting you at some point in person. And I would like to take you up on that tour of the nursery at some point. So maybe him and I can hop in the car and head out your way at some point.
Yeah, we need to get you over to a new location. That's where all of our propagation is. And if you're really interested in the seed, that's the place you'll want to see. It's got a little taste of everything over there. We have the same capacity and production over there, but all the propagation, the seed's done there. So that would be a good one. And we do tours. It's just a question of timing. We have a lot of people out at our nurseries. We've had everybody from Federal Highway Administration down to school kids. So we do like to open it up and have people see the nursery. And we have about 20 acres of floodplain that is sort of our outdoor educational living classroom, where we've got riparian buffers and created wetlands and stream restoration work and stock block plants. So it gives people a chance to see not only the production end of it, but then the true application of a lot of where our plants end up in the natural environment. So it's good. We'd be happy to host you.
Fantastic. We look forward to that. All right.
Thanks so much, Jim.
Thank you.
Great
Jim.
talking to you.
Hope to talk to you soon.
Sounds good. You all have good holidays, and thank you very much.
All right. Take care.
Too.